The great hall of the twins stank of river mud, roast meats and false smiles. Robb Stark stood stiffly at the altar, his jaw clenched so tightly his mother worried he might grind his teeth into dust. Beside him, Lady Roslyn Frey, young, quiet, pretty enough, kept her head down, barely daring to meet his gaze. It wasn't what he wanted. It wasn't Talisa. But war left little room for love. And after Catelyn Stark's tearful warnings and Sir Bryndon's sharp reminders of honor and politics, Robb had relented. He would marry Walder Frey's daughter, just as he promised. His men had cheered when he made the announcement. Lord Frey had laughed, cackling like a crow. And so the wedding happened. Roslyn was gentle, nothing like Robb expected from the spawn of a man like Walder Frey. She barely spoke, except to whisper thank you when he helped her onto the dais. That night, Robb sat beside her in their chamber, shoulders heavy with guilt, and thoughts of Talisa's tear-streaked face the last time he saw her. But Roslyn didn't cry. She only asked him, "Do you hate me?" He didn't. Not really. Not her. Outside their chamber, the Freys toasted and sang and got drunk enough to forget their pettiness. And the Northmen drank too, grateful the blood hadn't spilled that night. No betrayal, no massacre, not yet. The next morning, Walder Frey wore a grin too wide. "You held up your end, King Robb. I'll hold mine. You've got the crossings, the men, and my blessing." But there was something in the old man's eyes, resentment tucked beneath the folds of fake cheer. Robb left the twins with a wife. On his arm, 1,000 Frey soldiers at his back, and a war still burning across Westeros. Yet he felt colder than the winds back in Winterfell. Catelyn rode beside him in silence, until she finally muttered, "You did the right thing." He didn't answer. They reached Riverrun 3 days later. Edmure Tully, now forced to marry another Frey girl in the place of Robb's original promise, seemed less than thrilled, but Roslyn's sister was no worse than any noble bride, and Edmure, after a few drinks and a long conversation with Bryndon, agreed to it. Another wedding, another chance to keep the Riverlands tied to their fragile alliance. By now, whispers spread across the realm. Robb Stark has married a Frey. The Red Wedding never came. In King's Landing, Tywin Lannister frowned. His perfect trap had been avoided. His informants at the twins wrote with bitter ink, "The Wolf." Og kept his word. In the shadows, Lord Rosebolton fumed silently. He had made promises of his own, and Lannister Gold didn't like failure. But Rose was a patient man. He could wait. The North would bleed eventually. He would make sure of it. Meanwhile, Robb continued the war, stronger now with Frey swords. But he noticed things. The Frey men never fought in the front. They arrived late. Supplies would mysteriously vanish on their watch, and still, Robb held his temper. He needed them, for now. Roslyn stayed at Riverrun, quiet, polite. But soon she began writing letters, careful notes to her sisters, trying to learn her place among wolves. She learned the northern gods. She watched Catelyn mourn. She saw the honor in her husband, and something in her began to change, and perhaps so did something in Robb. He started talking to her just enough. She listened. She never pushed. And one night, months later, he looked at her and didn't think of Talisa first. But war leaves no room for peace. Because far to the south, Tywin was preparing a darker answer. If swords couldn't kill the wolf, whispers might. Betrayal could. Be planted, and even love, no matter how unlikely, could be poisoned from the inside out. The chill of winter began to stretch its fingers across the Riverlands, bringing with it not only the cold winds from the north, but the scent of something fouler, doubt. Though Robb Stark had gained new allies through his marriage, the peace that followed felt more like a truce written in sand, easily blown away. Back in Riverrun, Roslyn Frey settled into her life as queen in the north with quiet grace. she kept, mostly to herself, weaving and praying in the godswood. The northern lords barely acknowledged her at first, seeing her as a Frey spy, a reminder of the shameful bargain their king had been forced to make. Only Catelyn showed her any kindness, perhaps because she saw the same haunted stillness in Roslyn's eyes that once lived in her own. One evening, while the fires crackled and the sounds of sparring echoed in the courtyard below, Catelyn sat beside her daughter-in-law and asked gently, "Do you miss your family?" Roslyn hesitated before answering. "Not really. Most of them scare me." Catelyn blinked. "Even your father? Especially my father?" It was the first time either of them laughed together, but the laughter didn't last. Because at that very moment in Harrenhal, Rose Bolton was whispering into a raven's ear. He sent letters to Walder Frey, letters to Tywin Lannister, letters promising opportunity, vengeance, and glory if only someone would act. And most importantly, he sent letters north to his bastard son, Ramsay. Meanwhile, Robb's war council grew restless. The Freys bickered with the Karstarks, accusing them of stealing supplies. Lord Karstark, still bitter over the execution of his kin for killing Lannister captives, barely held back his rage. Sir Brynden Blackfish warned Robb, "This alliance with the Freys, it's like bedding a snake and expecting it not to bite." "I know," Robb said, "but we needed them." "Need is not trust," the Blackfish replied. Then came news that shattered what little unity remained. Robb's uncle Edmure returned from his wedding not just with a new wife, but with a warning. Lord Walder had started acting strange, speaking openly of not getting his proper due, whispering to Bannerman, laughing when no one else was laughing. "He's angry," Edmure said, slumping into a chair. "He wanted revenge for the slight. This marriage might have bought time, but it didn't earn forgiveness." That night, Robb and Roslyn dined together in silence until he finally asked, "Do you think your father would betray us?" She set her fork down slowly, as if the question weighed more than steel. "My father would burn the world for a joke he found amusing." Robb stared at her. "And what joke would that be?" "That you trusted him." Still, there was no betrayal, not yet. Instead, there were more subtle wounds. Rumors began to swirl about Robb's legitimacy, about Roslyn's womb being cursed, about Talisa still alive and bearing his child in Essos. All lies, all planted. Robb confronted his council. "Who is spreading this poison?" But no one answered. Rose Bolton simply raised a brow and murmured, "Whispers travel faster than horses." The Frey men began leaving in small groups, claiming orders from their lord. Then more disappeared. A caravan of grain meant for the front lines vanished entirely. Lord Rickard Karstark left Riverrun in disgust. The unity Robb bled for began crumbling in his hands. Through it all, Roslyn stayed. She could have fled, could have gone home, but she didn't. One night, after receiving yet another letter from her family, this one demanding she return to the twins for a family gathering, she stood in the courtyard alone. Snow began to fall lightly on her shoulders. Robb approached her quietly. "I won't let them hurt you," he said. She turned to him, surprised. "You still don't trust me?" "No," he admitted, "but I trust what I've seen." "You're nothing like them." Roslyn smiled for the first time in days. "Neither are you. That's why they hate you." And then she handed him the letter, the invitation, the bait. Robb read it and knew. Walder Frey wasn't done with his revenge. He had just changed the date. Robb didn't sleep that night. The letter from Walder Frey lay on the war table like a bloodied sword. He stared at it until the candle burned down to a stub. The message was clear. Walder had forgiven nothing. His pride still ached. And now, With most of his men having quietly returned to the twins, Robb was being summoned to walk right into the trap he'd only narrowly avoided once. "Is it another wedding?" Catelyn asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "No," Robb said, running a hand through his hair. "He calls it a reconciliation feast. He says the realm needs healing." Brynden Blackfish spat on the stone. "You floor. And next, he'll ask you to kneel and kiss his feet while he puts a knife in your back." Robb looked at Roslyn. She kept her face still, but he could see the storm in her eyes. "He wants to show the realm that we're united," she said. "And if you refuse, he'll use it. He'll say you broke faith again." "Either I walk into his hall," Robb muttered, "or I make him the wronged party again." But this, in time, Robb Stark would not walk in blind. He began moving quietly. He summoned more Northmen, sent scouts to watch the crossings. He ordered Glover and Manderley forces to march within striking distance of the twins, hidden under the guise of reinforcing the southern campaign. He even reached out to Howland Reed, a man who owed his life to Ned Stark, asking for information, secrets, anything. And he brought Rose Bolton close. Too close, because Robb needed to know if the snake within his court would strike first. "Lord Bolton," Robb said during a small council meeting, "you've been quiet. I find silence a rare luxury. In war," Roose replied with that usual dead look in his eyes, "words win nothing. And yet," Robb said, "they can poison everything." The room tensed. Rose gave a slow smile. "Poison is a coward's tool," he said, "not a northern one." Later that night, Robb met with John Umber, Lord Karstark's cousin, and Mage Mormont. Trusted voices. He laid out his plan. "We go to the twins, but we don't go alone. We take double the men they expect. We prepare for betrayal, but we don't start it." "Let them bare their teeth first," Mage grunted. "Then we gut the whole cursed brood." Catelyn, overhearing, from the corridor, stepped into the room. "If you die in that hall, the North dies with you." Robb looked at her. "I won't die. Not there, not like that." But what none of them knew, what not even Roslyn could see, was that the true betrayal was already in motion. Not from Walder Frey, not from Rose Bolton, but from a direction no one considered. The North, because Ramsay Snow had taken Winterfell. He had captured Theon Greyjoy, flayed him, broken him, but most importantly, he had begun calling himself Bolton. And when word reached Roose, it did not enrage him, it pleased him. "My son has proven himself," Rose told Robb when the letter came. "He has reclaimed Winterfell in your name." Robb read the letter, heart hammering. He wanted to be glad, but something about the words felt wrong. "Then why does it say the Ironborn surrendered?" "Theon would never surrender." Rose smiled. "Everyone breaks in time." The silence that followed was deep and cold. Robb finally nodded. "Then let the bastard of Bolton hold Winterfell, for now." But in private, he spoke to Catelyn. "If we survive the twins, I'm sending men north. I want to know what really happened in Winterfell." Catelyn didn't argue. And so, Robb Stark rode to the twins once more, this time not as a young king in love, but as a hardened warrior expecting knives behind every smile. Beside him, Roslyn wore the Stark colours, head high. Around him rode 10,000 Northmen, their armour gleaming, their blades sharp, and waiting in the shadows, Walder Frey prepared his feast. He would smile, he would toast, he would feed them bread and salt. He would pretend for a moment that history had changed, but his knives were still sharpened, his daughters still wept, and somewhere in that cursed castle, betrayal still waited. Because even when a Stark keeps his word, the world finds a way to punish him for it. When the gates of the twins opened again, Robb Stark felt every step echo with memory. The banners of House Frey fluttered in the cold wind. The Riverlands had darkened since his last visit, and so had the mood. Robb arrived, not with joy this time, but with calculation. and quiet fury. Walder Frey greeted him at the hall entrance with that same smug, wrinkled smirk. "My king," he rasped, "I trust the accommodations will suit your honor this time." Robb returned the stare without blinking. "I'm not here for comfort, Lord Frey. I'm here for peace." "Aye," the old man grinned. "Aren't we all?" Bread and salt were served, publicly, ceremoniously. Walder Frey made sure every soldier and every lord saw it happen. The ancient rights of guest protection still held power, if only on the surface. Rosalind stood beside Robb, holding his arm with a mix of fear and grace. Her sisters barely met her gaze. Her father didn't acknowledge her once. It was clear she was a Stark now, and that meant she was already disowned in Frey eyes. The feast began. Roasted meats, sour red wine, laughter that didn't reach the eyes. Frey daughters lined the hall like mannequins, while lame Lothar and Black Walder offered wine with smiles that were too wide. Robb watched everything. He didn't drink. He didn't dance. Jon Umber's men spread out quietly through the castle, pretending to be drunk, while Mormont warriors stood by the exits. Outside, northern archers had taken position, hidden in the woods, watching for signal fires. Robb was ready, but Walder Frey was not a fool. He didn't strike during the feast. Instead, he made speeches. Dry, mocking speeches about loyalty and broken promises. "It warms my heart," he croaked, "to see young Rosalind's belly still flat after all these months." The room went quiet. Robb stood slowly. "Careful, my lord. The North remembers." Walder waved a dismissive hand. "A jest, a jest. Don't Northerners have humour?" "No," Catelyn said from the high table, eyes burning. "Not when their sons are baited like dogs." For a moment silence reigned, then Walder grinned again. "Good, that means we understand each other." The next morning, Robb called a private meeting in the courtyard. Brynden, Catelyn, Mage Mormont, and Jon Umber gathered close. "He's not going to kill me here," Robb said. "He wants me to be the villain this time. He wants to provoke a response." "Then give him one," Mage growled. "Not yet," Robb replied. "We hit first, we lose the realm, but we can isolate him." He gave orders: cut off the roads behind the twins, control the supply lines, intercept ravens, quietly, carefully. But it wasn't enough. That night, a guard was found flayed, his skin nailed to a post near the stables. A Bolton banner was tied to his corpse. Rose Bolton claimed ignorance. Savages in the night. Perhaps a Frey trick to blame me? But Robb knew Bolton had shown his colours, and now war was not a question. It was a certainty. Before dawn, a scout returned with a message. "Ramsay has declared himself Warden of the North. He claims Winterfell. He wears your father's cloak." Robb crushed the message in his fist. That night Rosalind entered his chamber, her hands shaking. "He's planning something. My father. He didn't strike tonight because he wants you to leave." "Weaker. He'll wait until your men are tired, scattered." Robb looked at her. "Then I have to strike first." She met his eyes. "Promise me, if he tries to hurt you, you'll kill him. No mercy. I promise." And so, Robb Stark began his final march, not as a boy king chasing honor, but as a cold, sharpened wolf. He would not let his people die in a Frey hall. He would not let Ramsay wear Ned Stark's cloak. One last battle waited, and someone wasn't going to survive it. Snow fell like ash across the fields outside the twins, cold, silent and endless. The Northern army had already begun pulling back under the cover of morning fog, just as Robb had planned. It gave the illusion of retreat, of weariness, of vulnerability. Inside, the twins, Walder Frey stood at the highest balcony, hands clasped behind his back, eyes narrowed. "Look at them," he muttered to Black Walder, "running like whipped dogs." Black Walder smirked. "Should I send men after them, father?" "No," Walder hissed. "We let them think they're safe, then we hunt them like foxes in the snow." But he didn't know Robb had never left. In truth, the majority of Robb's force had pulled back only a mile, circling through the woods, to flank the twins. The rest stayed hidden in barns, cellars, and even under false walls, waiting. At sunset it began. A single arrow flew across the sky and thudded into the wooden door of the east watchtower. A red cloth was tied around it. Signal. Within moments, the outer perimeter burst into chaos. Northern archers emerged from the trees, launching a rain of fire upon the guards atop the walls. Inside, John Umber and Mage Mormont led their squads through hidden passages, cutting down Frey soldiers before they even reached for their weapons. Robb Stark moved like a ghost through the main hall, flanked by his dire wolf Grey Wind, snarling, bloodthirsty. Finally let loose, the twins became a slaughterhouse. Black Walder tried to rally the men near the inner court, but was crushed beneath a Mormont's axe before he could bark his second order. Frey men ran, confused and unarmed, many having trusted their king to be gone, and in the high hall, Walder Frey sat frozen on his throne as the doors were thrown open. Robb stepped inside, armor streaked with blood, his sword already drawn. Behind him, Catelyn entered slowly, face pale but burning with fury. "King Robb," Walder rasped, eyes wild, "you violated guest rights." "I brought my own food. I didn't eat your bread, no salt, no lies. This time the blood is yours." "You wouldn't," Walder tried to rise, trembling. "I am the Lord of the Crossing." "You were," Robb said, and ran him through. There was no ceremony, no grand speech, just the sound of blade through old flesh and the thud of a coward's body falling from a throne made of stolen pride. Outside, the battle had turned. Roose Bolton's men stood at the edge of the fray, hesitant. When Robb's bannermen encircled them, Roose himself raised his hand. "I won't die for a Frey's pride," he said. "Not today." He ordered his men to stand down. But Robb didn't sheathe his sword. "You backed him," Robb growled. "You fed me to wolves while your bastard burned Winterfell." Rose gave the faintest smile. "And yet here you are, whole. That's something." But it wasn't enough. Catelyn stepped forward. "Your line ends here, Rose, for Ned, for the North." And this time, Robb did not flinch. Roose Bolton died with a sword through his chest, his last breath a whisper. "The North doesn't forget." By morning, the twins were no longer a Frey stronghold. They were a tomb. Robb buried the Frey women with dignity and the guilty men in shallow pits. He sent ravens across the realm. The Red Wedding never happened. The Freys betrayed. Peace. They were punished. When word reached King's Landing, Tywin Lannister sat in silence. His perfect trap had been broken, not with swords alone, but with patience, precision, and something he'd underestimated, a Stark learning from failure. Back. In the north, Robb returned to reclaim Winterfell. Ramsay had fortified it with iron and blood. But he hadn't expected the real wolf to return. The siege was brutal. Theon, barely human, was found chained in the kennels. The North rose behind Robb once again. Manderley, Reed, Glover, Serwyn, all flew Stark banners. Ramsay died the way. He lived, surrounded by dogs, but they didn't obey him anymore. And in the great hall of Winterfell, Robb Stark knelt at the heart tree and whispered a single promise. Never again. Beside him, Roslyn placed her hand on her stomach. The child she carried would be born in the north, not a Frey, not a pawn, but a Stark.